On this episode of the iFilmmaker podcast, we're falling in love with the process with Mike Pecci. Welcome back to another episode of the iFilmmaker podcast. My name is Ariel Martinez. On this episode, we have Mike Pecci, director Mike Pecci. He is an award-winning director. He has made some great films and has been in the industry for 19 plus years. That's pretty impressive. I invited Mike Pecci to talk about his podcast and his basic concept of being in love with the process. I think it's a very interesting topic that I wanted to dig into. So we had a great conversation, and Mike is a funny dude, and I just loved having him on and just conversing. Even though we may have disagreed in some areas, I fully respect Mike's opinions on the industry and just the entire process in general. I like his perspective, and I think that it's great that we hear everyone else's point of view on this process. There's really no right or wrong way to do things. There's some people that are more successful doing things in one way and other people that are successful doing things other ways. And there really is no right or wrong way. So with all that being said, here's my conversation with Mike Pecci. All right, so Mike Pecci, thank you so much for coming on the iFilmmaker podcast. How are you, buddy?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome, dude. So I've been looking at your work. You've been doing some fantastic stuff. Your website showing everything. Your podcast, the In Love with the Process podcast. Really, really great body of work that you've been doing. And I kind of wanted to dive into your approach on your projects, what you love to do, what you enjoy to do, and even talk about your podcast a little bit later. If you could actually let me know how you started in video, right? So kind of the audience can know how you got started, what has been your roller coaster ride. I'm sure we all have that. And what got you to where you are now?
So when I was younger, I wanted to be a comic book artist, and I thought I was going to be a comic book artist. And so I was classically trained on painting and figure drawing and watercolors and all that sort of stuff as a kid. But I was a terrible student. So I had horrible grades in high school. So when I applied to art school, I didn't get in. So I immediately didn't get into art school, which totally gave me a bad taste in my mouth. And I instead went to work for a music store. So I ended up being a manager of a music store for years. And through the process of that, I decided that I thought I was going to do radio. And I said, okay, radio would be cool. I loved the idea of introducing new music to people. I knew a lot of A&R reps from being in the music store. So I was like, yeah, let's go to school for radio. So I went to a community college and finally got my first radio show on a community access station. There it is, Mike. And it was super late. It was like 3 a.m. And I remember the program director coming over to me and going, okay, so at the bottom of the hour, you can play all the CDs that have a green sticker on them. And at the top of the hour, you can play all the CDs that have a yellow sticker on them. And I'm like, why am I here? Why am I here? What is the purpose of me being here? And so pretty quickly I was like, F this. And I was out. And I just happened to be taking a film course for credits. And so and mind you, this was like, I'm an old dude now. So this was, prior to 1999. Okay. So there was no YouTube. There was none of that stuff.
Right.
And so every once in a while, maybe you'd see something on TV on like how they made movies. So maybe you would see, and this was even like early on in the DVD. So maybe you'd see something on like how they did Jurassic Park and you're like, wow, I thought they actually grew real dinosaurs. And so I went to this film course and I had my brain blown open. We were watching Citizen Kane and we watched Blade Runner. It was the first time I had seen Blade Runner. And I remember sitting there watching this movie going, oh my God, this movie's so amazing. And then the teacher was like, can you imagine what it was like to design the outfits for this? And I know it sounds stupid, but I was sitting there in the class going, whoa, wait, someone does this. Like this is their job. And I was looking at it going, this incorporates everything I love. This is comic book artwork. This is being able to design and tell a story within a two-dimensional frame. This is music and mood and introducing people to music and mood. This is it. This is what I want to do. And so I remember I went down to my guidance counselor and I was like, I want to be a filmmaker. This is what I want to do. And he was like, okay, well, you got to take all this other stuff. You got to take all these accredited courses. And you're really not going to get a camera for about a year. But if you take all the accredited courses, and I was like, how much do each one of these courses cost me? He's like, well, a certain amount. I go, I'm taking the accredited courses so that your school stays accredited. So that I do this for that? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, all right, I'm out of here. And so I ended up bailing on that. And I did a lot of research looking for a school that would let me start immediately pick up a camera. And this was in the early days of New York Film Academy. They weren't even accredited yet. And so they were starting courses. And so I saved up my money and I went and took courses in New York, which was great. They actually teamed you up with 4 other students and you were guaranteed to do 4 short films a piece. And so I ended up really sort of immersed with these really great guys. And I was the only one that really liked shooting. So I ended up being a cinematographer, a DP. I shot all their stuff on film. And then after school, I was like, because I ended up having to move to New York City. I didn't have any connections in New York. And in that city, I had to, A, find a place to live, B, produce, find locations, find actors. I was running auditions in a Barnes & Noble restaurant, in a coffee shop. So I figured out how to make movies in a city that I'd never been in before. So that school really didn't teach me much about directing. They more taught me about producing. And after we graduated from school, a bunch of my buddies were staying in New York and they're like, do you want to get an apartment together? Do you want to stay? And I thought to myself, if I go back to the city that I was born in, I will probably be able to do a hell of a lot more because I got more connections. I got more people than I know. So I ended up moving back to Boston and starting a company. And this was in 2000. And I've never had a full-time job since. I've been essentially working in this business. And for years I was a cinematographer because I had to teach myself cinematography because this was early days of digital. So most cinematographers were old, crusty film guys, and a young kid couldn't convince them to come over and shoot stuff.
Right.
And so I had to teach myself cinematography, and then I decided to get into video early on. This was early days of XL1, GL1.
Right.
And so then I became known as a cinematographer, digital cinematographer, and I was doing that for 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you have some time in the industry, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing this
That's
for a little
great. That's for about a minute or two.
Well, dude, that's the whole thing. And when I was talking to my pals and they were like, you should do a podcast, when I decided I wanted to do a podcast, I really had to think hard about it because I don't believe, and no offense straight across the board, but I think there's a lot of people that do podcasts in our industry that are kind of snake oil salesmen. And I'm not saying by any means your show is, but I've encountered other shows that I had the experience and the time. So I didn't decide to do a podcast until I had been doing this for 18 years. You know what I mean? So,
right.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. So definitely want to talk about your podcast, but I want to see your approach on your projects because you're doing narrative, right? But you're also doing commercial. What do you enjoy doing more?
Well, the truth of the matter, this was something that I encountered years ago. The longer story of this was years ago, I had a successful production company. So me and my old business partner were doing music videos for big bands, MTV Award videos, writing for Ozzy Osbourne and Devo and stuff for Wu-Tang Clan and doing all that kind of stuff. And the music video industry kind of tanked because the music industry tanked. As soon as Napster showed up, as soon as people weren't buying CDs anymore, the money isn't coming into the labels, and the labels were expected to finance music videos. And then the labels used the fact that MTV stopped playing music videos as a reason to lower their budgets. And so they started to say things like, well, it's only going on the internet. So why would I give you an MTV budget for the internet? And it's well, jerk. This is being seen by how many millions of people? This is so specific. So we had to change our business plan. And so we decided that we needed to do commercials because I had a company and we had to keep the doors open. And so we got into doing commercials. But the whole time I did both those things, it was always to bide time before I did my movies. So I would sort of excuse it. And I would say to myself, look, I'm at least going to learn new techniques on this. I'm going to learn how to direct a union crew. I'm going to learn how to direct multiple actors. I'm going to learn how to cast correctly. And so every project I did was me basically practicing for the features. And then I hit a point where I was doing that so much that I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, am I just chasing my tail? Am I just chasing these smaller jobs because I'm afraid to do feature films? And I think a big portion of that for me was fear. Was like, hey, look, I don't think I have a great story to tell. I don't think I have a good enough story to tell. And then, you know, I'm probably not going to make it. So like, I have to make sure that I have another career path.
Right.
And it wasn't until I went on this is a pretty infamous story of mine. It wasn't until I went on a date with this girl and I went ice skating for the first time. And she dragged me down to this pond, and her and I had been going out for a little while. We were friends prior. And she was constantly asking me to go skating. I had never put ice skates on. And this was like my early 30s. And so I kept avoiding her. I kept saying like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, sure. Yeah, eventually. And so I eventually got that line from her where it's like, well, you've never done anything that I want to do. And I'm like, okay, all right. So let's go ice skating. And so I ended up strapping these blades on my feet and I'm sneaking out onto the ice with her, and she's pulling me around on the ice, and I feel like completely emasculated. I have all these these 5-year-olds doing pirouettes around me, you know, and so I get frustrated and I say to her, just skate off and I'll figure this out. Like, I'll figure out how this works. So skate away and I'll catch up to you. And so she took off, and I look at this little kid, a little 10-year-old, and I watch him, and he pushes himself off, and I was like, I could do that. So I push and I slip and I fall all the way back and land on the back of my head. The last thing I hear is an old oak barrel crack. And I wake up in intensive care. I've cracked my skull. I'm bleeding internally. There's a hematoma forming on the top of my brain. And the doctor looks down at me and he goes, so here's the deal. Normally what we do is we drill into your skull to release the blood pressure. But we can't do that because it's on your main blood vessel. So if we drill just a skosh too deep, you bleed out, you die. So what we're going to do is we're going to sit here to see if the bleeding stops. That means you can't go to sleep. So we're not going to let you go to sleep, and you have to call your parents. So call your parents, call your family, because you might not make it out of this. And so I ended up being in intensive care for 5 days. The bleeding ended up stopping, which was a good sign. And then wow. I had to wait about 5 months to get through the concussions and to see if my brain would absorb the blood. And so in that period of time, I had to ask myself a lot of really serious questions. I was like, you know, my life's good. I've had a successful production company. I've got this girl who I think is pretty cool. I mean, she took me to the hospital. She's been here the whole time. I've got a good family. So what am I not happy with? And it was like, I haven't made a feature. I haven't made a feature film. And so I was like, if I get out of this, I'm going to make a feature. And the cool thing about that whole process was that I was going through these crazy hallucinations because of the pressure on my brain. So I had this theory that my inner voice didn't belong to me. I was going nuts. And so I was completely inspired by it. And I had the girl at the time was with me the whole time. And I had her record my ramblings. And I was just sort of rambling my experiences. And I ended up writing, in that period of time, the first draft for a feature, 12 cam. And when I came out of it and recovered fully, thank God, first thing I did was I was like, I have to make this movie. And so I ended up doing a proof of concept, which is a 30-minute proof of concept, and changed my life. That ended up getting me representation, got me rep by UTA, got me management, got me in some of the biggest offices with production companies out here in Los Angeles. I mean, I sat and interviewed with like Michael Bay's people, with Ridley Scott's people, like straight across the board. It really changed my life.
Wow, it's incredible that it took something like that to get you out of your comfort zone, right? To get you moving. And, I hope that people can learn from that experience and they don't have to go through something like that for them to get moving. That's quite inspiring, man. Thanks for sharing that, for sure.
Yeah. Well, dude, like at the end of the day, we all need it, right? So you decide that you want to get in this business, right? Which is like deciding that you want to slowly have your eyelids pulled off your face.
Right.
It's like this long, excruciating, unrewarding process. And you decide that you want to do this, right? And then you get stuck in rhythms because you get afraid, or you get some success and you're like, hey, I made a great commercial and suddenly I'm known as the guy that makes really great knife commercials and everybody wants to hire me. And so then you find a groove and you put yourself in that groove. And next thing you know, 5 years goes by and you're like, what the hell am I doing? Am I just a guy doing knife commercials? Am I just a guy doing music videos? I thought I wanted to be a filmmaker. I thought I wanted to tell stories and make movies. And it's hard to come to that conclusion.
What is your basic message to people that are stuck in that rut where they're making things that they that wasn't meant to be their lifelong goal of just continue to make commercials, or things that they didn't even think about before, but they're doing it because that's what brings in the money? What is your message, your general overall message to them?
Well, the truth of the matter is they know. Are you happy? They know. You know when you're not happy. You feel miserable, you're depressed all the time, you're pretending like you're happy, you're angry, you got an attitude. Like, are you happy doing what it is that you're doing? And let me say, there's nothing wrong with diverting or changing your plan. Like, if you set out and say, hey, I want to be the next Steven Spielberg, and then you find yourself doing corporate videos and you love it, because there's nothing wrong with that. I think people feel ashamed for being really good at doing solid corporate videos or doing really good YouTube content. There's money in that. There's careers in that. And if you are good at it, lean into it. But if you find yourself doing it and it's an excuse for you not to do the other thing, because the other thing is really hard. It's really hard because there's no roadmap. This is what we talk about on our show all the time. There's no roadmap. It's not like deciding to be an EMT or a firefighter, where it's like I go to fire academy, I do a certain amount of hours, and then next thing I know, I get hired. I make sure I live in that town. That it doesn't exist for us. And so all we can do is hear other people's stories and go, how did you do it? And then maybe learn from that.
Yeah.
But there's no system.
Yeah. I see that fear absolutely plays a huge factor in people not moving forward, because what we're talking about here is people dedicating a lot of time and effort and work into producing a product that might not even be well received in the end. So are you willing to put weeks, months, years into one product that in the end may or may not go your way? And that's the fear factor there. That's what people, I feel, kind of shy. They go the shorter route in, I can do a project that will take me a few days and immediately know if I'm good at it or not. And, if it's not, then I'll take a few more days to get better at it, right? And this will bring me money as well. I'll do this route, as opposed to, a much bigger project where in the end might not be good for me and I can ruin my career in one of those. And it's a fear. It's pretty intimidating when you think about a process like that.
Well, dude, I think there's a big misconception right now, because there's so much access to stuff with YouTube, right? So you can go on YouTube and literally learn how to use any of this stuff, like pretty quickly. You can actually micro teach yourself things without learning the whole program. Just go like, how do I do this? Bam. And you just look for those specific things. And I think a lot of folks that are coming up in the film industry or trying to get into the film industry are doing that. They're sort of micro teaching themselves specific things, where you forget filmmaking is an incredibly social business. And so the irony is that a lot of people that get into it are antisocial, are people that don't like to hang out with folks. And it's like, I'm a little artist and I'm in my little cave and I'm doing my little thing. And believe me, I started that way, where you're very antisocial. Okay. And you forget that your job is to convince your living, breathing paintbrushes to do what it is that you want them to do. So like I have to convince, as an artist, I have to turn to my grips and my electrics and my actors and my producers and my financiers and deal with all their life issues and weave my way through that and then convince them of this idea that I have in my head to sort of come to fruition. And that process can take up to 8 years. So like that long process to just do one project. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And here's a rule that I've seen work 100%. Understand that if you get into this business and you're going to teach yourself this business, any of it, and you're going to work your way into it, you are not going to be anywhere for 8 years. It won't be until the 8th year. And this is the truth. The 8th year is when someone's going to call you to do what it is that you do. It takes 8 years. And I've seen this with everybody that I've had on my show with guests. I've seen this with all of my friends that have been in the business. It takes that long for you to become known that you even do it, for you to become known that you're any good at it, for a client to come back to you. And so a lot of younger filmmakers will write to me all the time and they'll say, how do you do this? And I don't know if I'm built out for this. And I'm like, how long have you been doing it? I've been doing this for like 2 years. I'm like, okay, you got to strap in and understand that this is the job. The job isn't being on set and directing people, or it isn't being on set and unloading a camera and looking through it, or even editing it. The job is teaching yourself for 8 years and gathering a toolbox that's ready so that when you get that phone call, you can bullshit your way through that phone call and then get access to do what it is you need to do. So understand that your job is to wait. It's to survive long enough, and it's to wait. And that happens now.
Yeah. And this doesn't only apply in sports either, but there's a good saying is luck, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't really know it word by word, but it's saying like luck is when preparation meets opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. So one thing that happens is that we spend a lot of time preparing, a lot of time getting ready, a lot of time getting good at your craft, whether it's sports, whether it's filmmaking, whether it's anything that you're really, really good at. But that opportunity is going to come. But when it comes, you need to be prepared for it, right? So, but in this case, you know, you want to continue to create. You want to continue to master your craft, so that on that 8th year, like you're talking about, when that opportunity comes, you know, you'll be so prepared for it. You're gonna nail that, and now it's a run for the races. Now you're off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is the other thing I talk about on the show all the time. Like, you have to ask yourself, why am I doing it? Why am I doing this? Am I doing this so that I can stand in front of a room full of people and go, look, Dad, I did it. I finally did it. Are you doing this to prove something to somebody else? Because if you are, it's going to take you so long to get to that point where you can cross your hands and stand in front of an audience. And when you do that, I don't know if you've screened a movie or if you've screened a project, it doesn't last. It literally, you have a high for about 15 minutes. And then everything after that starts to cool off. And then you start to go into a depression because you're like, I'm done. I've finished this. What am I doing now? What does my life mean now? And so if you're only doing this stuff in this business for that moment, if you're doing it to stand at Sundance, if you're doing it to brag about the work that you've got on Netflix, you're not going to get that feedback. You're not going to get that. And so I think that's one of the reasons why our show's called In Love with the Process. You have to learn to fall in love with all of the stupid stuff that happens in between. So like you really sort of respect location scouting. You respect writing treatment. You start to really respect meeting individuals and hanging out and networking with people. I mean, you and me having this conversation right now is a big part of it. Like, that is your job. That is the life. And as you're laying on your deathbed and potentially going to die, you sort of look back on the stuff that you've done. And for me, when I was in that position, I had like these little pins, like on a map. I had these little pins in my life where it was like, okay, so 2 years ago is when I did that project, I did this project, I did that project. And I was like, what happened in between? What was all the stuff that happened in between there? And I had to think really hard about it. And I was like, oh, remember that awesome time I had when I had to go location scout for that Kill Switch Engage video. And me and my best friends rented a convertible and drove up and down Route 1 in California 6 times and drank beers. And it was a blast. And remember when we found crack needles behind the mirror when we were shooting in that hotel room? That was crazy. And so then you start to really love and respect the process, the details, and the details are what make us who we are.
That's killing it. So tell me a little bit about your podcast. I know you're probably already mentioned a lot of the stuff that you talk about there, but how did that come about? How did you, I know you said that also you were 18 years into it into your career, when you started your podcast. What's the goal of your podcast?
So what happens is, it's weird how these timing things actually work. So 8 years in is when people started to pay attention. About 10 years, 11 years in is when I started to have younger filmmakers writing to me consistently, because you've done enough work. So you've got work out there that people start to respect. And so I'd start to get emails from folks going like, how do you do your taxes? Like, how do you run your business this way? Or it would be even more specific, like, how do you find inspiration? Like, I can't find inspiration for all this stuff. And I literally would be writing emails. Like, whenever I had spare time, I would be responding to them. And I'm like, there has to be an easier way to do this. And so we started to look into podcasting, because I was like, look, this would sort of take care of all of that internal stuff. And so for the first year that I did the show, it was more for my fans and for my clients. And so I was kind of doing the show that sort of explained my process and really sort of dived into how great the life can be if you decide to really get past, I'm here to make a movie, and I'm here to make movies, you know? And so I did that for about a year, and the show kind of really expanded and blew up a bit. And then once I did the move from the East Coast to the West Coast, because I have 2 movies that are now in development out here, I was like, man, I should really use this show to showcase what it's like to get your first film and how that works, and what the steps of that first film are. And so for the past year, I've just been getting really great people on the show that I either want to work with or people that I respect. And I'm just stocking up all this information for the first movie that hopefully starts to roll next fall, hopefully. So it's been great, dude. Like I've learned so much just by having guests on the show. I've learned how to communicate better by doing a podcast, which is actually great as a director. And I've met some really phenomenal fans and phenomenal people that really enjoy the show. So it's, I don't want to say the show's rated R, but the show is like no holds barred. If you come on the show, we just have a conversation. Pre-COVID, I would just have beers and we would, eat sandwiches and have beers. It's like the worst audio ever, but it's a great program for it. And it's been fun.
Great. How long have you been doing it?
3 years now. Like we are, what episode are we on? We're like over 100. So we're like 120 or something like that. But 3 years of doing it. And thankfully, thankfully for COVID, it's been here. You know what I mean?
Oh man. So earlier you mentioned about your paintbrushes, I guess, your grips, your DP, your the audio, whatever. How do you go about finding the right people and communicating your message to them? Is there something unique that you do in order to make sure that they can envision your vision, so that they can see what you're going for?
Yeah, I think the most important thing you need to do is you need to sort of get control of your ego. And we all have an ego. And a lot of times egos either will come from experience, like you have done something successful and you're like, well, I know what I'm doing now. Or it comes from inexperience, where you have to have, in order to convince anybody to let you direct anything, you have to have confidence. And a lot of times it's false confidence. And so a lot of folks will get into the position where they're like, well, I know what I'm doing, and it's like, you really don't though. You're just saying that you know what you're doing in order to get in there to get the gig. But now open up a bit. And so once you check your ego, then you understand that the job is about surrounding yourself with people that know more than you do, that have all the answers for you. You know what I mean? Your video's just going in and out, so I'm just going to keep going. So it's about finding the people that know more than you do, and it's about being able to say, I don't know. And I think a lot of people assume that being a director and saying, I don't know what the answer to this is a death sentence, and it's not. It actually opens the world to you.
So that was actually pretty powerful. The ego thing is definitely something that I've had to work on myself, still working on it. But I definitely see that when it's evident in other people. And those are people that are hard to work with. And it's definitely an obstacle that a lot of people need to definitely overcome to be able to collaborate better on projects.
Well, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because if the ego's in the way, then you cannot communicate with that person.
Well, yeah. And then at the end of the day, I think early on I came to this realization that I don't believe in genius filmmakers. I don't believe that people are born and they come out and they go, oh, okay, give me a 25 millimeter. And you know what I mean? Like that doesn't exist. I think that's all PR. That's all press. And so filmmaking is a very collaborative business, but it should be, because when I come up with an idea and I start concepting on an idea at my desk, I don't know what the answers are. I'm making best guess at it. Like I've never, been a ninja that jumps off a roof and fights with this person. I don't physically know how that happens. I know what I'd like to see as a moviegoer, and I know the vibe and the tone that I'd like to see from the piece, but I'm looking forward to collaborating with a stunt coordinator who knows how to do the flip, and with a key grip who knows how to like bring a crane on a dock and test the weight load of a crane and dealing with the wind situation. Like all that stuff is fascinating. And I don't know the answers to that stuff. And all those elements are needed. If I was drawing it as a comic book, all I would need is a page and my pencil. But for me to do the same thing on paper, I need 50 people to do that same thing. And so the move really is finding folks, and it takes a while. That's part of those 8 years. Those 8 years that I was talking about before, what you're doing is you're going to work for free. You're going to work for free on your friends' projects. You're going to work for free on other jobs. That's why it's almost ridiculous for you to have a student loan behind you. You're going to work for free for all this stuff. And
right.
Then what you're doing is you're building your community. You're building your group. You're building those folks that are going to be with you for years. I still work with people that I knew back when I started. You know what I mean? So like,
right.
In that period of time, you're learning the skills that you need to have to find good crew, to communicate with good crew. And if you go work on someone else's short or on someone else's production as a PA, don't just stand there. Don't pick up your phone and get on your phone. Actually look around and see how that director communicates with people. See how that director convinces an actor to do what they need them to do. See how that director convinces an entire crew to keep working even though lunch is showing up 10 minutes late. Like all those things are incredibly important. And these aren't the sexy things. These aren't the things that people are doing YouTube videos about. These aren't the sponsored pieces. This is what filmmaking is. How do you convince? It took me years to realize as a commercial director that my job is not actually working with the crew. My job is sitting with the client. And it took me so long to realize that as a commercial director, it's more important for me to sit with the clients and actually help and guide them through the process than it is for me to hang out with my pals that are shooting it. my pals already know who I am. All I have to do is walk over there because I work with them enough and go, hey, do me a favor. And they go, and then, and you go, yeah, okay, you already know. Okay, great. And then you walk away.
That's good.
It's important. Like, filmmaking isn't a sexy gig, and it's promoted as one. It's promoted as like, hey, I want to be Tarantino and everything's really great and the world's great. There are really good moments. I think like 5% of my life has like holy crap moments where you're just like, I don't know how I got here and this is amazing, holy crap. But the rest, the 95% of it it's hard work. It's lonely. It's hard work. And so I think once people get that wrapped in their head a bit more, and once we all sort of understand and honestly don't become afraid to tell the truth about it and talk to other filmmakers about it and to share with other filmmakers, then it becomes a community. It becomes a real community of people that are looking for help. It took me forever. It took me forever to get on another director's set. Forever. And I remember when I finally did, I got to hang out on the Farley Brothers sets, and they were wonderful. They were wonderful to me. We knew a producer. He was wonderful. And they actually brought me on the sets, and I got to hang out at Video Village and wear headphones and listen to how Peter directed folks. And
wow.
It was such a beautiful experience for me. And I saw how these guys that make slapstick funny movies, and a lot of movies that didn't do well, how they still were working and why they were still working because of how they communicated with people and how they treated people. Incredibly inspired by them. And since then, whenever I have the opportunity, I try to visit other filmmakers' sets. And I love finding filmmakers that aren't threatened by it. You know? And it's really interesting shit.
So somebody approaches you today and they say, hey, Mike, I want to be a filmmaker. No experience, no nothing. How do you respond to that?
Why do you want to be a filmmaker? What is it that you find interesting? Do you have a story that you want to tell? Do you want to pick up shiny new equipment? Like, do you want to travel the world? Do you want to make a lot of money? Like, why is it that you want to do that? And then when you answer that question, and it's so hard for people to answer that question. I get really frustrated because I have a lot of people that come to me and ask me those questions all the time. And the ones that I stay with, the ones that stay in my group are the ones that can answer that honestly. And that come out and they go, I want to jump out of airplanes. And it's like, cool. I want to strap a camera to myself and jump out of airplanes with Tom Cruise. Okay. I know the guy that does that. I know Wade Eastwood. I've interviewed him on the show and we've talked about that whole process. And it's like, I can tell you how to get there. But when people are just like, I just want to make movies, and you're like, okay. And there's this whole thing that goes around right now where people are like, well, then just pick up your camera and make movies, or pick up your phone and make movies. Answer that question first. Why do I want to do it? And if you don't know why you want to do it, then go PA. Go PA. Go work on other people's movies. Go work for free. Go be there. See what it's really like. See what it's really like to be a director when you have breathing down your neck. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, there's a reason why these flip out videos, like Tom Cruise and all these other flip out videos come out and they release. If you're a real director, you go, oh, I understand why he's flipping out, because the job is incredibly stressful. It's incredibly stressful. My beard didn't start turning gray until I was doing my movie. But yeah, I mean, that's what I would ask first. And then if they wanted to get into it and they had that purpose, then you have a focus point where you're like, okay.
Now, a lot of what you said, I see how it absolutely can apply to narrative work. How much of this applies to commercial work, where now you're talking about clients and...
Dude, 100%. 100%.
100%?
Yeah, like it's the same thing. It's the same thing, just tweaked, right? Because even now, filmmaking, like if you go work for Disney, if you go work for any of these big things, they're essentially giant corporate companies. And so you're essentially walking in there as a creative working for a commercial client. So it's kind of the same deal. And if you're talking about commercials, why do you want to make commercials? Why? And if you look at it, you go, okay, my job is to help somebody sell something that needs a commercial made for it. And I always joke about this. Whenever you watch commercials on TV, you go, most of these ads for commercials that cost a lot of money, it's because their product is terrible and they need to sell you on that product. How many great products out there don't have commercials? You know what I mean? They don't spend millions of dollars on their advertisements for it. It's most of the time it's because the product needs to be sold. It needs to be sexy. And that's what your job is. So then ask yourself, am I making commercials with the right outlook, which is I'm here to sell a warehouse full of stuff. I remember, probably shouldn't tell this story, but I had a sponsor years ago, and I was at NAB, and I was there doing stuff for another sponsor, and this I won't say who they are, but this other sponsor brought me over, and they made monitors. So they brought me over to this booth, and it was this big booth, and I had been a spokesperson for them for a little while, and I met the owner of the company, and he was a very nice guy, and he brings me back in the back room, and he goes, I would like to show you our new line of monitors. And he showed me the new line of monitors, and they had a very specific feature on them, which was HDR. Okay. So these HDR monitors. And I looked at him and I go, yeah, okay. And he goes, what do you think? And I go, well, honestly, I think it's kind of going to be a pain in my butt. Like, I don't want to see all the way into the shadows. I hide cables in the shadows. I don't want to see into all this stuff. It's kind of a pain in the butt. And then what do I need to do? I have to change all my stuff for this. It's going to cost me more money for this thing. I don't know, dude. And he looks at me and goes, well, it doesn't matter. I got a warehouse full of this, so we got to sell it. And I went, oh, right. Right. You don't really care if I think it's cool. It would be nice if you thought I was cool, but you got a warehouse full of this stuff that you need to sell. And anytime I take a commercial job, I remind myself of that. These guys are calling me because they have a warehouse full of stuff that they got to sell. And so when you say that you want to be a commercial director, you got to remember that. And if you're getting into commercial directing because you want to help convey another person's message, because you're not often writing the scripts, you're never writing the scripts. Some creatives are writing the scripts. Some copywriters are writing the scripts. You have to deal with the corporate structure of a creative agency mm-hmm. where you have 9 people behind a monitor all trying to make sure that they prove why they have a job based on it.
So many cooks in the kitchen, man.
Yeah. So when you decide that you want to be a commercial director, it's even more a social gig, and it's a politics gig where you're sort of getting in there and you're getting on a call and you're like, who's the person that I'm supposed to really be friending on this call? Who's the person that really is the guy that's doing this? So it's the same thing. And I think the move, whether you're talking narrative or if you're talking commercial, is being able to get out of your body and get a drone perspective of it. Get that bird's eye view of whatever project it is that you're working on. And you look down and you go, this is the reason why we're all here. And if you can figure that out, then you can plot how much creative energy you need to put and where you need to put it. And then you can also figure out who you need to be appealing to based upon your career path and where it is that you want to go. You know?
Do you think that the advancement in technology for the past 10, 15 years has made it easier for filmmakers to break in, maybe bring that 8-year waiting period, make it a little bit faster by a few years for the sole purpose of, they're able to obtain equipment significantly cheaper and they're able to display their work on more platforms where there's a lot of people now. For YouTube is the most obvious example of that. Do you think that that's had a role in that whole process?
Okay. This is going to be an answer that'll probably piss a lot of people off. No. I think that out of my 8 years, the amount of time it took me to figure out gear was probably about a year. So the gear has never been a problem. Before YouTube, there was instruction manuals. The gear's never been a problem. And the people that manufacture gear and they sell us on this gear and they try to say that we're defined by this gear, which drives me insane. They want you to know how to use it. So if you've ever wanted to use gear, just go down to your rental house and befriend those guys and they'll teach you how to use it and then they'll get rentals out of it. So the equipment aspect of it is so minor. And you're seeing this because more people have access to upload stuff. That's why there is a plethora of crap on YouTube. There's tons of crap. And the difference is we now are sitting through all the stuff that I would have done in my 8 years on my own tapes, on my own edit system that wasn't into the public. We're now seeing it in the public. So we're seeing all these people learning over those 8 years and trying to figure this stuff out. And so we're sorting through this big pile of crap, essentially, that goes out there. And I'm not the only one to say it. I just had Mike Diva, who's an amazing YouTuber, and he's been around for ages. And him and I have a long conversation on an episode about this, and then YouTube, in order to stay current on YouTube, you need to upload twice a week. You need to upload, like 15 minutes twice a week in order to even show up on their algorithms. And so you're just dumping loads and loads of crap on YouTube just to stay relevant. Dude, I can't come up with 2 pieces a week that are any good.
Yeah, I was more referring to the fact that you're able to display, let's say that you want to be a good commercial director or a narrative director. The fact that you can upload things onto social media, not specifically YouTube, but also Facebook or any other social platform, where now you have a lot more potential eyes on it. And, that might being able to land in front of the right people might, make that process go a little faster, and that you might be getting a phone call quicker than you expected.
Yeah, to a certain extent. But dude, at the end of the day, like, everybody's still sorting through that stuff. Like right now, Instagram is where all the creative directors hire because they're on Instagram anyways. And so they barely ever look at your websites. So if you're putting together a website, just have it there to put your clips up that are longer than you can put on Instagram. Everybody's hiring through Instagram. But at the end of the day, if it's a real substantial client, if it's someone that has a lot of money to spend on it, they're going to want references. Oh, yeah. They're going to want referrals.
100%.
They're going to want all that stuff. So they may see your work. They may start to follow your work, which is good. I got my movie stuff seen because I had an article written online for it. It's fantastic for that stuff, but it doesn't shorten the 8 hour, the 8 years.
Right. Well, a good example of that, we contacted you just less than a week ago. We got you on the show. We made a contact. I'm going to continue to follow you. You'll probably follow the show. You're accessible there. The moment that somebody contacts you, that you see something that they like, that you like, from their work, you now have that in the back of your mind. Things like that sort of happen in terms of building relationship, building connections, and networking.
Sure.
So that's kind of what I'm referring to in that sense, where how social media has grown and technology has grown and given the people the opportunity to put their work in front of people, where before that wasn't a thing. That was significantly harder.
I completely agree with you. I think I'm just hyper focused on your statement, which is, does this make it shorter for the 8 years? It doesn't.
Right.
And even though you have, so for instance, you're on year 2, right? And you happen to be in the best place possible. You find yourself in the spot where a comet actually crashes onto the planet. And you decide around that comet that you're going to get your friends out and make a little short film around this comet thing. Right place, right time, you make something amazing, right? You put this piece out, it goes viral. Everybody loves this piece. Now someone wants to hire you to do their comet movie. They're going to start talking to you and going, oh, so you were just in the right place in the right time. Do you have the skills? Do you have the skills to recreate this? Do you have the skills to with the stress of money behind you, do you have the skills to recreate this moment that was just handed to you? And that's the sorting. That's the difference. And by no means am I saying that you should be frustrated by this or upset by this. You should be confident with this. This should empower you, because if you're doing this for 2 years and you go, I'm not getting anywhere, if it's comforting to know that you got time in and you're not going to waste your time. This isn't a waste of time for you. This is important.
Well, so I definitely agree with you. And I'm always of the mindset of it's never going to be overnight. So do not expect that. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. You're going to mess up. You're going to mess up. And, you know, what I tell people is make your mistakes already. Just they're going to happen. It's inevitable. Not a single person, Christopher Nolan, made probably an incredible amount of mistakes throughout his career.
Dude, every day, daily makes mistakes. Daily.
Absolutely.
And dude, I prefer to make mistakes because when I make mistakes, I learn more as opposed to when I hand something into someone and I go, what do you think? And they go, it's great. And I go, that's it. As opposed to somebody that looks at it and they go, I've got a problem. You go, okay, explain to me what your problem is. And then you're like, okay, next time I'll, and it's a better experience, you know?
That's good. That's awesome, man. Dude, so this has been a phenomenal conversation. I think we can continue on and on and on, and I definitely want to have you back on the show. Where can people find your work? How can they get in contact with you? And once again, go ahead and plug in your podcast.
Sure. If you want to see any of the projects that I've worked on, you can go to mikepecci.com. There, you'll see all the commercials. You'll see the music videos. You'll see all that. I have the trailers for my 2 films, my 2 proof of concepts up there, but I'm not putting those online. The only way you could see one of those films is if you write to me on Instagram. If you go to Instagram at Mike Pecci and you write to me and you send me your 3 favorite horror movies, if I agree with you, then I'll send you a link to one of my movies.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
And then if you guys want to hear me curse a lot more, if you want to hear a lot of these theories in play with people that work in the industry, and we try to, now that I'm getting access to people, I try to have them on the show. Go to inlovewiththeprocess.com. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Apple Podcast, all the outlets. So it's In Love with the Process, and we release every Tuesday. So.
Dude, Mike Pecci, thank you so much for coming on the iFilmmaker podcast. Definitely want to have you back on the show.
Sure, brother. Thanks so much.